Syracuse football adds another player in the transfer portal. They get Georgia defensive back Chris Peal, plus a lot of action with Syracuse basketball still. And to break it all down is 24/7 Sports Insider Mike McAllister.
You are Locked On Syracuse, your daily podcast on the Syracuse Orange, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, everyone, and welcome into Locked On Syracuse. I'm Jackson Holzer, and thank you for making us your first listen of every single day here on the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Of course, we are always free and available wherever you get your podcasts. And on today's show, we are joined by Syracuse 24/7 Sports Insider Mike McAllister. Syracuse football recently added another player in the transfer portal. They get Chris Peal, a defensive back. So we'll ask Mike about him, as well as more football news and basketball updates, all that and more here on this edition of Locked On Syracuse. But before we get to everything, today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Right now, new customers can get $200 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. Mike, thank you so much for taking the time today. So Syracuse added Georgia defensive back Chris Peal in the transfer portal, a 2023 four-star recruit. How do you think he fits in with Syracuse football?
You know, it's really interesting with some of the recent commits they've had. They've had a Pringle, they have had a Rice, they now have a Peal, and then they have a Cook. So I don't know if Fran's just hungry. Like, I don't know what's going on there, but listen, Chris Peal,
You're forgetting one.
Who am I forgetting?
Peanut butter and jelly.
That's right. That's a good call. I don't know how I forgot that, that nickname is fantastic, by the way, and I'm really disappointed in myself that I didn't come up with that. But as far as Chris Peal goes, they've clearly been looking to add someone to the defensive back room, and specifically looking at corner. We know that they were looking at Julian Neal earlier in the offseason. They've had a couple others that they've been linked with. So you knew that they were going to try to grab someone that they thought could impact the room. Now, they wanted someone with experience, which some of the other guys that they were looking at bring. Chris Peal only has 4 or 5 games of experience in the 2 seasons that he was with Georgia. So he doesn't bring a ton of, on the field experience, but he is out of high school for multiple years. And he was someone that was extremely highly regarded coming out of high school. It's a top 300 overall prospect, someone with great length at the cornerback position at anywhere from 6'1" to 6'3", depending on where you're looking, and also a track star. So he's not just one of these bigger corners that's 6'1", 6'3", but a little bit slow of foot, right? He's not that. He's a track star as well. Ran a sub 11-second 100 meters in high school. Really good long jumper as well, and a triple jumper. So this is an all-around high-level, elite-level athlete. And I think he gives Syracuse someone, again, with length, with good coverage skills, and a lot of untapped potential. Is he going to start? I don't know. But you would have to figure he's coming in at a minimum with a chance to compete for significant playing time.
Gotcha. And along those lines, you mentioned all those attributes with Chris Peal. How come things didn't necessarily work out for him at Georgia?
Georgia always seems to have 5-star NFL caliber players at every single position. So it's not overly surprising when you have a 4-star top 300 prospect that first couple of years at a school like Georgia isn't playing a ton. And even go back to last offseason when Syracuse got Jackson Meeks. And I don't think that anyone thought Jackson Meeks was going to be someone that made a significant impact on the offense. And then you get to the end of the year and you could make the argument that he was your most reliable pass catching target, and turned that opportunity into being an undrafted free agent as an NFL prospect, which he wasn't on anyone's radar coming into Syracuse, primarily playing special teams at Georgia across 3 or 4 seasons. So when you have a team like Georgia, a lot of these SEC powers where the rosters are loaded, there are guys that are second, third, fourth string that are very talented football players that can help other teams. And Syracuse is certainly hoping that Chris Peal will fall into that category, just like Meeks did.
Well, I think all Syracuse fans hope that is exactly the case. And it's actually, in my opinion, one of the big benefits of the transfer portal. A lot of people hate the portal. And there are some reasons to hate the portal, especially when you see a guy like Trevor Pena walk out the door, or Murad Watson just gets a huge money offer from a big-time school, and there's just nothing that Syracuse can really do about it. But one of the big benefits of it is you can no longer recruit all these 4 and 5 stars and then no longer play them. So if you don't play them, they're going to leave in the portal and they're going to go elsewhere. And we saw it last year with Jackson Meeks. It can work out to a team's benefit, especially because, hey, like you said, Jackson Meeks became an all ACC wide receiver. And it's funny, Mike, because he wasn't really on anyone's radar, so much so that not even really on the coaching staff's radar. He wasn't a starting wide receiver to begin the season.
No, and, it's funny when all of the offseason prognostications, I think, had Justice Ross Simmons as being the biggest impact transfer wide receiver that they were going to have. And instead it ends up being Jackson Meeks. Now, injury certainly played a part of that. But, it just goes to show you that you never know. I mean, they had a transfer wide receiver from South Carolina before this Trevor Pena situation happened. And then they end up going and getting Jonte Cook. And now I understand that Jonte Cook is an extremely talented football player. Hasn't realized that yet at the collegiate level, but he was an elite level recruit for a reason. There is a lot of untapped potential there. But what if it's not him? What if it's the kid from South Carolina? What if it's Daryl Gill that breaks out? I mean, Emmanuel Ross, who was a 4-star recruit that came in a couple years ago. The thing is, you just don't know how everything's going to work out. And sometimes players, let's be real, every single player that ends up going to a Power 4 school out of high school is like at the elite 1% of athletes at the high school level. They're all very talented. And so sometimes situation, opportunity, coaching method, scheme, all of those things can play into how successful you are.
Right. And you know what? They are better athletes than you and I. They are certainly they're not even 1% of the world, Mike. They're like 0.0001%.
It's insane.
Of the world. They are insane athletes.
It is.
You think I can run a 4.3 40? I can run maybe a 5.5 40. 5.5.
Yeah, it's
how you run a 4.3, John. And also along those lines, like, look, you keep throwing darts at the dartboard, and no pun intended with that, but you keep throwing darts at the dartboard and it increases your chances of actually hitting on a couple of these players. So whether it's Jonte Cook or it's Chris Peal, I know it's a different position, but Jonte Cook or a Tyshawn Russell, you just keep throwing darts over there and you get one player to hit. Well, boom, you look like a genius. The NBA playoffs are in full swing, and every night delivers highlight-worthy performances, major momentum shifts, and can't-miss moments. Whether it's a game-winning shot or a breakout player, there's never been a better time to get in on the action. FanDuel makes it easy to stay in the game before tip-off and live. With player props, performance trends, and same-game parlays, fans have more ways than ever to play smart and win big. Now, imagine you have $200 in bonus bets for your first $5 bet, and you probably want to bet on a favorite during the second round of the playoffs. Well, the Boston Celtics are probably going to beat the New York Knicks. So not only can you bet the Boston Celtics to beat the Knicks, which will probably happen, but you'll also get $200 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. New to FanDuel, it's the perfect time to sign up. Head to FanDuel.com and place your first $5 bet. If it wins, you'll get $200 in bonus bets. Make every moment more with FanDuel, official sports betting partner of the NBA. We're joined by Mike McAllister, Syracuse 24/7 Sports Insider. The Orange obviously made a big move yesterday, football, I should say, with getting Chris Peal in their defensive back room. Where does Syracuse right now sit scholarship-wise? So
by my count, they are at 103 total scholarships, which gives them 2 to play with. Now, it was my understanding, I'm to be incorrect on this, that the long snapper they got from, I think it was Wake Forest last offseason, who's I think projected to be their starting long snapper this year, or at least in the mix there, that he was under scholarship percent on that, but he's included in that number. And all we have to remember that Jaden O was given a scholarship this offseason, so he's counted in that number as well. So it seems it's 103 by my count. If I'm wrong on the long snapper, it's 102. Either way, they've got 2 or 3 to play with if they're looking at that 105 number that is still technically not official yet, but everyone is still expecting to become official at some point. But as of right now, it's not. If for some reason it doesn't happen, then they're about 17, 18 over what the scholarship limit is.
So just to summarize briefly what Mike just said, because you did cut out a little bit there, but it's okay. You were a little bit in and out. That's fine. Syracuse has 2 open scholarships remaining pending the long snapper. If the long snapper doesn't count, then they have 3 open scholarships remaining. But Mike, you hit on it at the end. They have 103 players right now. Let's say 103 under scholarship. What happens if it's not increased?
Chaos. That's going to be, if you're looking at it strictly from just an interesting, entertaining standpoint, that I think would be what some people who don't have stake in the game would be rooting for, because then it's crazy. And I don't think Syracuse is going to be the only school that's involved with such a situation. There are other schools that are planning for the 105 and have increased their numbers as well. But if all of a sudden that doesn't come to fruition and you have to be at 85 and you're 16, 17, 18 scholarships over that, I don't know exactly what happens. Does Syracuse try to sue the NCAA and say, no, the 105 should be the limit, and then you get to play with what you have, because that's going to take God knows how long, and how long court cases seem to take before they can even get adjudicated? Or does Syracuse have to have some difficult conversations and cut people? I mean, that would be awful. That would be a terrible situation, but I don't know what other choice you have. I mean, I'll give you a kind of dumb example, but a lot of people picked up the college football video game, right? That came out this past year, NCAA 2025. Well, if you, after your offseason recruiting, are over the scholarship limit of 85, there's an option before you get to your next season called encourage transfers. And it'll tell you you're at 97, so you have to basically cut 12 people off of your roster. And so you go through and you make those decisions and you cut the players that you don't want anymore. But that would be awful, because there's a lot of players that are here that believe they're going to be under scholarship and whatever, and that just would be among the worst possible scenarios. I don't know exactly how it's going to play out. I don't know what the legal options are if it doesn't go through, but certainly would not be a great thing, especially given that all of the rhetoric we've heard around that House settlement case is that it was pretty much a slam dunk that it was going to go through. So it would be pretty awful for all parties if it didn't, and Syracuse had to make some tough decisions.
And Mike, you mentioned that you can, on that video game, you can encourage the transfer portal. The transfer portal's closed.
Right.
You can't enter it. So I don't, you literally straight up just have to cut them and make them walk-ons, which that would be terrible. I really hope that it stays at 105 just for everyone's sanity and really for these athletes, because that would be awful for them.
There's a couple of other options. So first, the transfer portal window is closed unless you're a grad transfer. If you're a grad transfer, you can transfer at any time. There's no open or closed window. It's all the time available for you. Number 2, there also is the option of taking them off scholarship, but they have such an NIL deal that essentially covers the scholarship, or you bump up their NIL deal by the cost of tuition, for example. So those type of scenarios, I think, would be on the table as well. So it would be very interesting to see how all that would play out. It
would be. I hope they keep it at 105. And
me too.
Even then, Mike, you're talking about the players who are going to get cut. I mean, they're literally they're not the players that are getting the big NIL deals. So their NIL deal is probably not going to cover the cost of tuition at Syracuse University. It's a very expensive school to go to. Switching gears here, we'll stay with football, and then trust me, we will get to basketball later on here in the episode. Where else is Syracuse football looking to fill those final couple of spots?
Yeah, Peal is kind of the last player with strong ties to Syracuse, or with there have been rumors or reporting that there was mutual interest there. There really isn't anyone else. We knew the offensive linemen were visiting, and then they all commit. We knew that the Djobet Cook rumors had been there for several days before it became official. And then the Chris Peal situation, again, we knew Syracuse wanted to add a corner. So what else could they be looking at? I mean, you can never have too many linemen on either side of the ball. Could you use another edge rusher? I think you can always use another edge rusher. And, you're still trying to figure out who's going to replace Fidel Diggs' productivity. Could you decide to bring in another linebacker with some experience? That could be something that perhaps they look at, or maybe even a safety with some as you're trying to replace Elijah Clark. It's kind of just, throwing ideas at the wall at this point with only those couple of scholarships left. It's not like there's one huge glaring need where it's like, oh, that is a massive weakness. They have to get that. Like they still don't have a quarterback, or they've only got 2 defensive tackles on the roster. They need to get some more. There's nothing like that going on. Could they decide to bring in another kicker to add some competition there? With the increased scholarships, maybe you can have a couple at each position that you want to throw there. If Syracuse decided watching the spring that they needed to bring in some extra competition there, that I guess could be on the table. But again, there's nothing that I see, at least on paper, that looks like there's this massive need that they have to go get this one position. It's almost like you're in the 6th round of the NFL draft and you're just taking best player available that gets you the best value at this point.
Fair enough. And that concludes our football talk. But folks, stick with us here on Locked On Syracuse, because we're going to switch gears and talk about basketball. That's coming up next on Locked On Syracuse. Scaling your business requires the right expertise at the right time. With Upwork, you can find specialized freelancers in marketing, development, design, and more, experts ready to help you take your business to the next level. Upwork gives businesses flexibility by connecting them with top freelance talent across multiple industries, including IT, AI, web development, and marketing. Whether you need extra hands for a project or a long-term partner, Upwork makes hiring simple and affordable. If you need help with a marketing campaign, Upwork can connect you with a freelance expert who delivered incredible results. Visit Upwork.com right now and post your job for free. That's UPWORK.com, Upwork.com, to connect with top talent and grow your business today. We are joined by Syracuse 24/7 Sports Insider Mike McAllister. As you can see in the background, if you're watching on YouTube, I switched over to basketball. We are no longer talking
That's very
about
creative.
football here. Thank you. I do it all the time on the ACC squad, and they always get a kick out of it. So let's get right into it. There was a report yesterday from Sam Kaiser on Twitter, 24/7 High School Hoops, for those that don't know, that Syracuse was among the teams that reached out to Miami guard or forward Paul Djobet. And keep in mind, Syracuse still has 3 open scholarships remaining. Now, Mike, the first question I want to ask you about this move is this. Is Syracuse actually interested in Paul Djobet? Because the timing is interesting, because they just added Tyler Betsy, who you would think plays the exact same position.
Yeah, so what we don't know is, when did this contact or showing of interest happen? It could have been a week and a half ago. It could have been yesterday, anytime in between. So you don't really know 100% when that interest occurred. To your point, it makes sense that he would be someone that they were evaluating among the wing, small forward, combo forward prospects that they were looking at when, the Valencia and Jerry Dang situations kind of fell through. They were another option there, and Tyler Betsy ends up being the guy. It would make sense that this guy would be the one that they'd be looking at as a potential. Just given what he's been, solid 3-pointer, decent athlete, 4 starts over 2 seasons, 39% from 3 during that time. Okay rebounder, seems to be a decent defender, but nothing from a physical state that's going to knock your socks off, right? But someone, again, similar to Tyler Betsy, has that untapped potential that you're hoping he takes a leap, right, for you. To your point, just from a roster construction standpoint, he looks to be more of a 2-3 combo, and they're pretty loaded in the backcourt. So it's hard to see a path for significant minutes there at the 2. At the 3, do you bring him in and he and Tyler Betsy are sort of competing with Nate Kings for the starting spot, and then the primary spot that's going to play a good chunk of minutes as well? From a Syracuse perspective, I could see why that would make sense. The more options that you have, then the more likely you are to hit on one of them. But from his perspective, if he has a lot of options, I could see him looking at Syracuse and saying, maybe that's a little too crowded. But we don't know for sure yet. I think we'll see how. But my guess is it was probably one of those situations where they had reached out to do some evaluating prior to Tyler Betsy thing becoming official. The other thing I just want to point out is when you see these lists of has been contacted or has been shown interest by, that can be something as simple as an assistant coach or Alex Klein or whoever calling up, an agency and saying, what's the deal with this kid? Why is he in the portal? What's going on? Or even an assistant coach at the former institution or a former AA coach or someone that they have a good relationship with and they trust, and saying, hey, can you tell me what the deal is with this kid? We're looking at all of our options right now. It could just be that. And then nothing materializes. So we'll see if anything ends up coming from this.
All right. Well, one player that is seemingly now back on the open market. Now, he didn't actually leave the open market. Of course, I'm talking about Desmond Claude, but the reason why it seems like he's back is because it looked like him in Florida, it was a done deal. He was going to go to the University of Florida. I can't tell you how many articles were out there from On3 and 24/7 Sports. Desmond Claude, Florida. It's like, yeah, it's a perfect match. It's just going to happen. And all of a sudden, there was a report from yesterday. Nope. UNC. Nope. Kentucky. Looks like they're going to get him. Nope. So is he a viable, realistic option for Syracuse? Obviously, there's the connection there with his mother, but
sure.
Could you see Syracuse actually having interest here, or are they done making these type of moves?
Well, again, from a Syracuse perspective, I don't turn away a talent like Desmond Claude. I know they got I know George, and I know they've got Kai and Anthony coming in, and they have several that they think very highly of. They think are very talented. But Desmond Claude is again, a very talented basketball player. He's really long, can play the 1 or the 2. He's not a great outside shooter. He's okay, average to below average there, but does so many other things, disruptive defensively. If he said, yeah, I'm willing to come in and battle for playing time at Syracuse, I'm not saying no to him just because you got a bunch of other good guards. I'm not. That said, some of the rumors, and I don't know how substantiated these are or the veracity of some of them. So it's a little irresponsible on my part to sort of give credence to some rumors that I haven't heard directly, whether they're true or not. But some of the rumors are involving NIL situations as why he could be still on the open market or back on the open market, as you said. That some of these situations with the other schools fell through is because perhaps he's asking for more than what they're willing to spend, or they couldn't come to some sort of agreement. If there's any credence to that side of it, then in order for him to come to Syracuse, you would think he'd have to take less money than what he was hoping to get from some of those other schools that caused them to back off, simply because Syracuse already has a lot of money allocated into the backcourt, into other players that they've brought in. So, there's only money to go around. I don't know how it's going to play out, but, it would be, it would certainly make things interesting. And again, he's very, very talented. And he's someone that, because of his length, if Syracuse were to add someone like him, like he could play the 3 in a 3-guard lineup And so there's a lot of things you could do from a versatility standpoint with your roster. And then you could move Tyler Betsy to the 4. I mean, there's a lot of things that you could do there if you were to add him. And if I'm Syracuse, I'm not saying no to him. If he's willing to come, it's something you can afford, and he's more than happy to compete for those minutes.
I don't even really think he would have to compete, Mike.
Yeah, he would play, absolutely. Okay, absolutely. It's just how much.
Yeah. I think it's more along the lines of, are you okay with not playing point guard? Because you're not moving Nate George off the ball. You can't do that. He's not suited to move off the ball. JJ is already off the ball. So Desmond Claude would be coming here to be the 3. Now, I think he could do it. I definitely think he could. And also, if it really just boils down to a money thing, then really it's just about if they're willing to pay him what he wants or more than what any other school would offer, then he might just take it anyway and not care about what position he's going to play. But yep, position fit, money. Well, it's probably going to be very, very expensive. But I hope that Syracuse somehow gets in on Desmond Claude here. Mike, who else should be on our radar? What types of moves do you think Syracuse still makes from here on out?
Yeah, I mean, I think the constant messaging you're getting from Syracuse as far as kind of reading between the tea leaves of the moves that they've made and the players are expressing interest in is they're not position specific. So yeah, they've got 3 scholarships available, but they're not saying we're going to use 1 on a center and 2 on forwards, or we need at least 1 guard in those 3. Like, I think they'll take any combination of positions as long as they feel like the players are good enough to help them, whether it's on the court, in practice, combination thereof. So I don't have specific names. Here's my guess as to what they could be looking for. They could be looking for another big. I think you'd prefer to have 3 if you can have 3 centers and 3 without Donnie. Because I know there's been some chatter about, well, what if you play him for spurts at the 5 if you're going a little bit smaller, or you want to bring Sadiq in, you want him and Sadiq to play together. That's an option. But yeah, so I could see them potentially looking at bringing in another big. And then, do you try to bring in, going back to the Miami kid again, do you want to bring in another small forward? So you feel like you've got at least 3 guys there that play, maybe a combo forward would fit there as well. But, they've been really good at keeping a lot of these things close to the vest. The Tyler Betsy thing kind of came up out of nowhere. Like, there hadn't been reports of extensive communication or a visit or anything like that. And, it's kind of been that way even with Nate George, right? Like, all of a sudden it was, bam, there's a report that he committed. And there hadn't been reporting that there, Syracuse was strongly involved there, or there were visits or anything like that. So my guess is still stations and evaluations going on behind the scenes. But other things to keep an eye on is, could they go to the international route for a high school prospect to try to fill the back end of the roster, and or look at junior college prospects? There have been several junior college prospects over the last few years that have gone to schools as kind of afterthoughts and have made an impact in one way or another. Don't command a ton from an NIL perspective. They're willing to for minutes to be on a high major roster. So there are some benefits to going after a junior college player or international player, because you can find guys that are okay with the back end of the roster and or okay with their playing time and wouldn't command a ton on the NIL market.
Well, Mike, thank you so much. Where can people find you on social media?
You can find me at McAllister Mike 1 on Twitter, or I believe it's the same on Blue Sky. And then you can find our website's account at Syracuse on 247 on Twitter and Facebook. And then I'm also on Threads and Instagram at Mike_McAllister.
Thank you for making Locked On Syracuse your first listen today. And for your second listen, if you're more interested in the transfer portal, well, you could check out Locked On's very own Portal podcast. Brian Smith has the latest rumors, portal entries, and signings. You can be the most informed fan on the rapid changes to the college football landscape. You can find the Portal Podcast on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts. And folks, thank you all so much for watching. Thank you all so much for listening. If you like this podcast, be sure to hit that like button. If you really enjoy the podcast, be sure to hit subscribe. Tell all your friends, and I will see you all again soon.